Alright, so this is part 2 of my birth story. I will link to part 1 down below. If you haven't seen it yet, you should probably go watch that first. So when I left off, we were kind of settling in for the night. I was on the monitors because I had the Cervidil placed, and at that hospital, if you have any kind of augmentation, they do continuous monitoring while that's being done. So at about 11 o'clock, we were kind of getting ready to go to sleep, and Eric my husband actually got to sleep on the little cot thing, and I was putting on some music and stuff, and then all of a sudden the monitors were going off because it wasn't picking up the baby's heartbeat, and so nurses came kind of rushing in. My nurse, as well as followed by another nurse. She put me on oxygen. She was rolling me from one side to the other. The second nurse came in and was starting an IV on me, and Eric was sleeping through all of this. He did eventually wake up and kind of sat up and wasn't sure what was going on, and I said, I don't know what's happening, but you need to get up. So they did get his heartbeat back. It was probably from him being in a funny position and lying on his cord because my water was broken, and so there wasn't as much cushion for him to move around and stuff. So they did get the heartbeat back on the monitors and everything. The nurse afterwards kept using the word resuscitate when talking about it, when we need to resuscitate the baby, we do things to the mom. So that was why I was on oxygen and the IV and all of that. But that is that is not a word that should be used when referencing your unborn baby. That was just bad. So she stayed in the room to monitor a little more closely for a little while, and then his heart rate was staying too high and it wasn't fluctuating as they would like, so that can be a sign of infection starting to set in, and my water at this point had been broken for almost 24 hours. So I was then started on antibiotics, IV antibiotics that I was on every 4 hours for the rest of my labor. And at this point, and they also, when they came rushing in, pulled the Cervidil out. The nurse pulled the Cervidil out, which wasn't even where it was supposed to be. It was almost falling out. So it wasn't even really doing what it was supposed to do. But my contractions started picking up at that point, which is kind of interesting. So we called our doula, and she came. She got there at about 1 in the morning, and she set up some electric candles around and kind of tried to keep things calm, tried to help me through contractions because they were now picking up and being uncomfortable, not necessarily painful, but uncomfortable. I had to breathe through them. So she helped me through the night with that, basically. I don't remember really what Eric did, but I remember my doula being there next to my bed, helping me through them. So then the next morning, which was my due date, April 30th, in the morning, the doctor who I had seen the day before came in and checked me, and I had not dilated at all. I was still just fingertip dilated, and I was a little bit more effaced, but not progressing, obviously, on my own. So we talked about Pitocin. We said that we would like to try some other things first, so basically we left it that we would take a couple of hours to try to do some other things and get things progressing on their own, and then we would talk again about it. And at this point, the doctors were changing, so we were getting a different doctor that would be with us for the next 24 hours. So for the next couple of hours, we walked around a lot. My doula tried to do the rebozo sifting on my belly, but the nurse came in and was stopped her, wouldn't let her do it, didn't know what she was doing, and wasn't comfortable with her doing it. So unfortunately we didn't get to keep doing that. But basically we were trying to do things to get the baby in a better position, because it didn't seem like he was in a good position to actually be progressing labor the way that it needed to happen. We also did what's called the Miles circuit, which if I remember, I will try to look up, find a link to it and put it down below. But basically it's spending, I think, 20 minutes in each of 4 or 5 different positions to try to get the baby in a better position and stuff. So we did that, which actually I was able to sleep between contractions during some of that, which was actually really good. I hadn't slept in at this point almost like 2 days. So I was exhausted. Around noon, the new doctor came in and checked me again, and again I had made no progress. I was, again, a little bit more effaced. I think it was at like maybe 90% effaced at this point, but like still not dilated. So we asked for a little bit of time to kind of talk about it. We ended up calling our Bradley instructor because I was having a lot of trouble being okay with going forward with Pitocin, knowing that may very well lead to an epidural, and feeling like I was letting people down who were on the same page with us for a natural birth. And one of the people I felt like I was going to be letting down was my Bradley instructor. We'd done Bradley childbirth classes, which I will again try to remember to leave a link for that below for more information about that. But it's really focused on having an unmedicated natural birth. And so we called her and talked to her about what was going on and tried to get maybe some advice or something to help us. It wasn't hugely helpful, but it was still good to kind of touch base with her. So after that, we, at around 12:30, agreed to start Pitocin. Started at a very small dose, and it was going to be upped every half an hour, which the nurse did without telling us. Like, she would come in and just increase the dose and not say that was what she was doing. My nurses were not very good. I was not happy with them. At this point, the contractions started to get really intense, very painful. I started getting really bad back labor. I was just having a lot of trouble getting through them and handling them. I hadn't slept in, as I said, 2 days. I was exhausted. Like, it was just bad. And I was on the monitors again because I was getting the Pitocin, and didn't have to be confined to bed, but was staying in bed. And no one was encouraging me to get up and move or do anything else. So I was just lying in bed, which I think was not a good idea. And my nurse kept talking to me about pain medications and epidural, telling me that, oh, you look so tired. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just rest and stuff like that? And really was not helpful, not good, not on board with my birth plan and what I wanted. And just, that was just not good, not a good relationship there. So after about an hour and a half of Pitocin, at around 2 o'clock, then my nurse came in to, I think, increase the Pitocin again, and said that the anesthesiologist was on the floor. Would we like to have him come in and talk to us about our options and stuff like that? And at that point, I just said, fine, just fine, send him in. So he came in and was just a jerk. Was talking to me through contractions while I was having contractions, which I think is just totally rude. And was really condescending, telling me that, like, if I can't handle the contractions, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get through the rest of labor without an epidural. Like, there's no way that I would be able to push if I don't have an epidural. Like, just awful. Just really awful. To the point where he was, like, in the middle of a sentence, and I said, "Thanks for stopping by, you can leave now," and kicked him out of my room. And so I really, really did not want to deal with him. Like, if he had come in and had a different bedside manner, I think the decision would have been a lot easier. But he made it so much more difficult because I just didn't want it. I didn't want him to be part of any of this. So I made it for about a half an hour longer, and then I just could not handle it. So at about 2:30, said, okay, I need the epidural. And so the anesthesiologist came back in and got that placed and everything, and we were all set with that. Let me see. Oh, and after he placed the epidural, we were talking about me wanting to get some food, and because I hadn't had lunch yet, and he, at that point, told me that now that the epidural was placed, he didn't want me to eat anything, which was just, like, that was the last straw, and I think I broke down crying at that point. I was so exhausted and needed food, and it was just bad. So that was awful. My OB did later say that he was okay with me eating, so I did have something eventually, but that was just not what you want to hear at that point. So we got some rest. I got a few hours sleep. Eric got a few hours of sleep. Our doula went and laid down and got some sleep. And so that was all good. And about 5:30 or so, the doctor came back in and asked me if I wanted to be checked. And I wanted to say no, because after so much disappointment of so many times being checked and not having progressed, I didn't want to be disappointed again and like be kind of pushed into a C-section or something like that. So I was hesitant, but I did want to know what was going on. So agreed to it, and like almost started crying when he told me I was 6 to 7 centimeters dilated. So that was just like amazing to hear that. And then about an hour and a half later, at about 7, I was 9 centimeters dilated, and within, it felt like a few minutes, maybe it was longer than that, I felt like I needed to start pushing, like my body just was doing it. And they said, go ahead and do it while they were getting the room ready. So kind of my body just like took over and was pushing. They also turned the epidural off at that point, because one of the big things that I wanted was I did not want the epidural really in effect while I was pushing, because I wanted to be able to feel what I was doing. And I wanted to be able to push effectively. So, so they turned the epidural off, and at about 8 o'clock, I like officially started pushing. They were like watching and making sure that I was doing it effectively and all of that. I asked at one point if I could use a birthing stool, and they said, well, if you can get yourself up out of bed and stuff on your own, then yes, you can. But like, because I had the epidural placed, they didn't think that my legs would be strong enough to be able to do that, you know, change positions or do anything like that on my own. So they basically told me no at that point. And then a little while later, I was pushing on my back basically, and then I asked them if I could flip over onto my like hands and knees on the bed. And they said, well, if you can move yourself without help, then yes, you can. So kind of like a contraction finished, and I was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and like flipped myself over all of a sudden. And they were very impressed that my legs were so strong and everything, having had the epidural and all of that, that they told me, okay, you know, whatever you want to do, whatever position you want, you can totally do it. So I stayed in that position on my hands and knees for a while until the nurse actually asked me to change to a different position, because she was having trouble seeing what was going on. And that position was kind of getting uncomfortable anyway, so I ended up like kind of on my side with my leg held up. I don't really remember exactly, but Eric was there, my doula was there kind of getting cold compresses and stuff. At one point I said there should be fans in these rooms because I was just so hot, and so a nurse was like, oh, we have fans, so they brought a fan in. I had my eyes closed most of this time while I was pushing, because I was just so exhausted and just needed to like not be paying attention to anything else going on and just be focusing on what I was doing. And I kept thinking, like, he has to be right there, like he has to be right there, because I had been pushing for a while. And let's see, at one point they brought a mirror when he was crowning. They brought a mirror so that I could see him crowning. I was able to like reach down and touch his head while he was crowning, which was a really weird feeling. Like, it's really squishy. It's interesting. And then finally, after like an hour and 45 minutes of really, really pushing, at 9:44, the doctor told me to reach down and grab my baby, which I was shocked about. I was not expecting him to have me reach down and take the baby myself. So I reached down and got him and brought him up to my chest, and there's a great picture of the doctor's hands and my hands and the baby, which I will try to remember. I will try to put it in here if I can remember. So I lifted him up to my chest, and he was there on my chest, and I just kept saying over and over, I can't believe he's here, I can't believe he's here. So after we did delayed cord clamping, so after it stopped pulsing, my mom cut the cord, and then the doctor actually milked the cord because we needed a cord blood sample to be tested for Lyme disease. So he actually milked it. So like, it was amazing that we got really delayed clamping, but still were able to get the sample, which was, I was not necessarily expecting that to be the case. And then I delivered the placenta, and he took a sample of that to be tested also, and we got to see the placenta, and he kind of pointed out things. Apparently the doctor that delivered was really into like very interested in placentas, which was interesting. So we have a picture of that too. I won't put that in here. So the baby was on my chest, and he eventually like hopped his way over and latched on, which was great. Like I had heard that that is not as common with babies whose mothers have had pain medication or epidurals. That mostly that happens with unmedicated births. So I was just so thrilled that he did that on his own. And, you know, people were there. My mom was there during the birth. I don't think I mentioned that. So it was Eric, my mom, our doula, and then the nurses and doctor and stuff. And so eventually, and my dad came in and met the baby and everything, and it was great. And then eventually, I think around midnight, things had calmed down and people had left. And, oh, and my brother-in-law, so Eric's, maybe both of his brothers and one sister-in-law drove to the hospital, like, were there in the waiting room. We weren't expecting it, but so they came in and met the baby too. And then around midnight, finally everyone had left, and he was weighed and measured. He weighed in at 7 pounds, 12.5 ounces, and he was 21 inches long. And we settled in for the night, and then the next morning we decided on his name, which is Alexander. And it was great, like finally having him there and having all of that labor and delivery and all of that behind me was really great. I have talked a bit about the struggles that I kind of faced making the decisions that I did during my labor, and the biggest one was getting the epidural, starting the Pitocin and getting the epidural. And I think that it was the decision I needed to make, but it was not the birth that I planned or envisioned, and it was just really, really hard to make those decisions, and feeling like I was letting everyone down, letting the baby down, letting myself down, because I wasn't able, like, didn't feel strong enough to do it on my own. I have since been working through this and everything, and trying to reframe it, and finally I'm starting to see it as more of a brave thing to make the decisions that I didn't want to have to make, that I was not planning on making. So anyway, so that is my labor and delivery story.